Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about the safety to perspective. So I once had a colleague who said, I will only work with you if you can tell me right now what the safety to perspective is. So this is something that is emerging in quality circles as the cool new thing that everybody needs to know what it is. So you will know at the end of this week. So what are the two major questions in today's talk? First is a critically important difference between work as done and work as imagined. And so we'll explain that. And then the other portion is this entire module is focused on incident investigations. So after a patient is harmed, hospitals require incident investigations. How can we do those with a safety to perspective, which is the way we want to do things in order to improve systems, as compared to the old bad way of doing things with the safety one? So work as imagined is a prescriptive model of work. It is how, in an ideal world, formal tasks as written in policies and procedures are supposed to be done. And the idealistic view of this does not acknowledge that task performance has to be adjusted to match the constantly changing conditions of work in the world. Work is done is a descriptive model. And what that means is what actually happens, boots on the ground, is the combat analogy. In the hospital, I guess you could say scalpels in hand, so in the operating room, in the hospital, in the emergency department, how does work actually happen? So the safety one perspective, and all of the information that I'm covering is from the required reading for the week. The safety one perspective is a find and fix approach. So it's a reductive approach. You're saying people should do what they're told, and if that happens, we're happy. When people don't do it, when they are non-compliant, when they make errors, then there are accidents, there are incidents, there are failures, and we have to go after those because they are unacceptable. And we are going to find who made those errors. We're going to blame them. We're going to shame them in order to make it so that person never makes an error again. It's actually pretty comforting to think about life that way, because the safety to perspective is much more complex, a much sort of scarier world to live in. In the safety to perspective, there is performance variability that is necessary to perform everyday work, that work as done. Sometimes it's successful. Sometimes there are accidents and incidents. So it's not a one-to-one. You didn't follow the rules, therefore the bad thing happened. It's you do what you always do, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So what do you do in a situation when failures are an expression of necessary performance variability? The answer is much deeper, much harder, and takes much longer, which is that you cannot investigate a single failure, a single death, come up with contributors and say what they are. You actually have to understand how systems are actually successful in supporting human expertise, and then work within that to make them even easier to work with. So with this perspective, we view humans as the safety resource. So they are not the people who make errors and cause bad things to happen. They are the heroes in our story, who have systems that are stretched to the absolute limits, chasing financial goals, chasing quality of work-life goals, chasing competitive goals in competitive industries. So at these stretched systems, how are experts adaptively just barely making things work well? And so in this model, the functions, purposes, and services are tightly coupled. And so what we're trying to accomplish is tightly coupled together and hard to tease out, which means any change that is done from a simplistic mindset of, oh, someone made a mistake, let's go implement a Band-Aid solution on the system, will, by definition, result in unintended consequences that have to be monitored for and themselves mitigated for potential addition of risk. And so clean technological solutions do not exist. It is not possible to put in barcoding and reduce human error. It is not possible to say we're going to have a pop-up alert that's going to tell people what the best practice is in this situation because they're clearly not following it, and then everything will work from there. So in the reading, it goes into more details. I won't read this to you. I just want to point out that this is a key table in the reading that lays out all of the differences between the safety 1 perspective and the safety 2 perspective. And I'd particularly like to highlight the risk assessment portion, which is the focus of this class, which is what is causing accidents. So in safety 1, it says there was a malfunction. What didn't work? Either the human or machine somewhere didn't work. Instead, safety 2 says, what are the conditions where you can no longer monitor and control how much performance variability is occurring? And in those situations, you don't know how close you are to the border of bad outcomes. So when thinking about doing, as we will in the next few weeks, sentinel event investigations, which are required by the Joint Commission for Hospital Accreditation, what we're laying out is safety 1 says who made an error and how can we write down and document that we did some form of human resources sanction, we did some kind of individual training, or we somehow told the individual not to do it again, possibly by firing them. In safety 2, we say, well, what are the contrast cases? So there was a negative outcome in this case. What are the contrast cases? In other situations where somebody almost made the same mistake, but it didn't happen. Somebody caught it before it happened. It was a near miss. Somebody detected it before a patient was harmed. Somebody was able to recover before the patient harm was extensive enough to even be noticed. How was this avoided, and how can we build this into the system? So in conclusion, work as imagined is a prescriptive model of work that is idealistic, formal, and documented in policies. Work as done is descriptive, and it's what actually happens. Safety 1 addresses human error, performance variability is controlled, and there are clean technology solutions. Safety 2 has a tightly coupled system that is better understood to support adaptive human expertise. Thank you for your attention.